Welcome to This Explainer. If you're a tech professional or looking to transition into IT, you know the struggle. Trying to figure out AWS versus Azure versus Google Cloud all at once? Yeah, that's a one-way ticket to burnout. Today, we're totally curing that choice paralysis. We're going to dive into a direct, data-backed guide on exactly which certification you should tackle first so you can build that foundation and, most importantly, get hired.
So if you're asking yourself which cloud certification to get first, well, here is the data-driven answer. I completely get that paralysis you might be feeling. It's honestly the ultimate trap in cloud computing for beginners. Just staring at three massive platforms, wondering which one is actually going to move the needle for your career, and then just ending up completely frozen.
Let's cut straight through the noise right now. Industry best practices point to one crystal clear rule of thumb. You have got to master one foundational ecosystem before branching out. Taking a fragmented, multi-vendor approach right out of the gate, that's a huge mistake. You absolutely need a rock-solid base in one cloud to truly grasp how the mechanics work across the board.
Okay, let's dive into our agenda for this explainer. We're going to cover overcoming choice paralysis, break down the big three exams, explore the cross-cloud Rosetta Stone, map out your ultimate training blueprint, and then, finally, hit you with the final verdict.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Overcoming Choice Paralysis, by letting the market decide.
You know, the absolute fastest way to stop overthinking your cert path is just to look directly at the market data. The numbers simply don't lie. Amazon Web Services is acting as the sustained global leader, holding incredibly steady at around 31% market share. Then you've got Microsoft Azure dominating the corporate enterprise space at 25%, and GCP, or Google Cloud Platform, is accelerating in this massive hypergrowth phase at 11%. Ultimately, your first cert should just align with the market liquidity of the industry you actually want to work in.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Big Three Breakdown, where we'll align these exams with your actual career goals.
Let's break down these entry-level exams by matching each platform's market dominance to specific paths. First up is the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner, specifically exam code CLF-02. This is basically the default choice for startups, scale-ups, global SaaS companies, and heavy Linux environments. If your main goal is capturing the maximum volume of job postings and tapping into the broadest market liquidity, this is absolutely your pivot point.
Let's talk mechanics for a second. The AWS exam is a 90-minute, 65-question test. To snag that badge and validate your foundational knowledge, you're looking at a minimum passing score of 700 out of 1,000. Not too crazy, right?
Now, what's really interesting here is the heavy 34% weight on cloud technology and services. That means you need to know core compute and storage components, think EC2 and S3, literally inside and out. Right alongside that is a massive 30% focus on security and compliance, which heavily tests things like IAM and the AWS shared responsibility model.
Now, moving over to Microsoft, we've got the Azure Fundamental Certification, or AZ900. When people ask about CLF-002 versus AZ900, this is where the split happens. Azure is just completely dominant in the Fortune 500, government agencies, and your traditional Windows or hybrid shops. If the company you want to work for runs a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement or an Enter ID infrastructure, Azure is unequivocally the way to go. For the AZ900 itself, you're looking at an exam that sits somewhere between 45 and 60 minutes. But unlike AWS, Azure is going to throw some multi-part scenarios and drag-and-drop interfaces at you. It really tests how you apply the concepts. The target is exactly the same, though. You need a 700 to pass.
But hey, a crucial warning for you here regarding the Azure management and governance domain, which sits at 30 to 35%. Statistically speaking, this is the highest failure point for test takers. It dives deep into highly abstract tools like Microsoft Entra ID and role-based access control. So you definitely can't just guess your way through this part. You really have to master those governance concepts to pass.
All right, let's pivot to GCP and see how this builds out our third pillar, the Google Cloud Digital Leader. This is the absolute go-to path for tech pros targeting advanced data lakes, digital native companies, and modern generative AI applications. It has a very specific architectural core bias toward containerization and unified analytics. Structurally, this one is a 90-minute pass-fail test. There is a heavy 30% weight on innovating with data plus another 30% on infrastructure and app modernization. That translates to a massive focus on natively baked-in data architectures like BigQuery and compute engines, particularly Kubernetes, which makes total sense given Google's deep roots in creating that tech. Moving to Section 3, the cross-cloud Rosetta Stone. Learn one, understand them all.
Okay, here is the ultimate secret that's going to save you hundreds of hours. Learning one cloud drastically lowers your learning curve for the others, because at the end of the day, the underlying mechanics are largely identical. Think about it like this. Once you grasp object storage, AWS S3 is the exact equivalent to Azure Blob Storage, which is the equivalent to Google Cloud Storage. Virtual machines, that's AWS EC2, Azure VMs, and Google Compute Engine. Serverless, AWS Lambda directly translates to Azure Functions and Google Cloud Functions. Once you lock in the foundation, you really just have to learn the new vocabulary.
Section 4, your ultimate training blueprint. Let's get into execution and your action plan.
It is time to transition from theory to actual execution, so you can guarantee a pass on your first attempt. If you're looking for the absolute best cloud certification training in 2026, you basically have two main routes. For an enterprise-grade deep dive, Pluralsight Cloud Training is the definitive path. They offer these fantastic, structured 17-hour video tracks and, this is huge, isolated sandboxes. That means you can practice without the very real, terrifying risk of accidentally racking up a massive AWS or Azure bill. On the flip side, you have free native platforms, providing zero-cost portals straight from the vendor engineering teams.
Let's quickly call out some of those excellent alternative foundational resources. You've got AWS Skill Builder with their gamified Cloud Quest environments, which are super fun. Microsoft Learn gives you live Azure portal test sandboxes totally for free. Google Cloud Skills Boost offers Gear Connect Quick Labs for temporary tenant access. And definitely don't sleep on third parties. FreeCodeCamp.org has an incredible 14-hour CLF02 bootcamp, and Coursera offers some really highly structured corporate partner AZ900 tracks.
Now, for the final polish. Before you even think about sitting for the real exam, you need high-fidelity mock testing. Using premium practice tests from Tutorials Dojo or John Bonso is absolutely the gold standard here. They perfectly replicate the phrasing you'll see at a Pearson VUE testing center and, more importantly, those tricky cognitive traps you are definitely going to face on exam day. Trust me, do not skip this step.
And finally, Section 5, the final verdict, where you choose your path. Let's bring this all together and finally end that multi-cloud choice paralysis. Here is your definitive, authoritative verdict, mapping your career goals straight to your ideal first certification. If your goal is maximum job liquidity and you want to work with startups, get the AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner. If you're targeting Fortune 500 companies and enter ID ecosystems, lock in the Azure Fundamentals AZ900. And if your primary focus is data analytics, AI, and Kubernetes, start with the Google Cloud Digital Leader. We've looked at the hard data, dissected the big three exams, translated the core concepts, and mapped out your action plan. Now the execution is entirely up to you. So which ecosystem fits your current career path best? Drop a comment below and let us know. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.